All right. One more thing I want to talk about here is um, Aristotle's criticisms of Plato on his theory of forms. Um, Aristotle has some blistering criticisms of Plato's forms, and and a lot of people took them very seriously. But in other words, he kind of shot down Plato's theory of forms right at the beginning, almost. Not everybody. Some people held on to the idea of forms, but a lot of people thought that Aristotle killed him on the forms idea. Aristotle, by the way, is a super famous philosopher. He's Plato's student. So Socrates taught Plato, and Plato taught Aristotle. But let me just dive right into his criticisms. There are more forms than things. That's what these are his 8 criticisms. There are more forms than things. Why? Well, because if forms are general types of things, think about just you. Okay, so you're a biped, a human, an animal, a mammal. There's 3. So Aristotle thinks that, he says, as if things get easier by doubling the number. A theory is supposed to simplify things, not make it more complicated, and there's more forms than there are things. Number 2, general terms don't always point to existent things. So, okay, you could think about like a unicorn. Okay, so a unicorn doesn't exist, but since it's a type of thing, it must be some kind of form for it. Or dinosaurs, they died out, but remember, forms never change, so there has to be a form for all the dinosaurs. What Aristotle actually has in mind when he's talking about this are things like goodness and justice and beauty, which are precisely the things that Plato he didn't really talk about. Those were the forms he talked about. He wasn't really interested in trees or something. He was interested in these kinds of forms: justice, perfect justice. So find out what perfect justice is and or perfect beauty. And Aristotle by the way, Aristotle was the first logician who wrote, books on logic. And he said, these things they're not existing things. People are beautiful, or things are beautiful. People are just. People are good. But goodness is just an attribute of existing things. It's not a thing by itself. It doesn't exist alone. It's a characteristic, an attribute, a predicate, as he puts it. So that's what he was really concerned with. But I mean, like I said, you can think of anything that doesn't exist. All right, number 3, forms don't account for relations. And his example is a man and the statue of the man have different forms pretty clearly. A statue is a statue, and a man is a man. What accounts for the fact that the statue is a statue of the man? Again, he was a logician. Relations are important in logic. The forms can't account for the fact that it is the statue of the man. Or look, it can't, other relations, son, daughter, husband, wife, any kind of relation between objects. The forms don't really explain how relations work at all. The 4th one is probably his most important one, or I mean, it's the one I think Aristotle is the most concerned with, and also it is probably the most crushing criticism is forms don't account for movement or change in the world. They can't. They never change. Forms never change. So how could they ever account for change? And he says, without accounting for change, this is a quote from Aristotle, the whole study of nature has been annihilated. I mean, what kind of a theory doesn't account for cause and effect and change in the world? It can't. It's definitely not a good theory. All right. 5, forms don't account for substance because they're not in things. Okay, this kind of requires that you understand what Aristotle means by substance. Aristotle actually has a very simple idea of substance. A substance is, you know, normal everyday objects, like a person, a tree, a dog, a cat, whatever. But what he's trying to say is the form is supposed to be separate from, like the cat is a cat, but the form is separate from the cat. Wouldn't it? That doesn't make any sense. The form should be, if the cat's a cat, the form should be in the cat. It can't be a separate thing from the cat. I know that's a little subtle. Maybe think about it. He says to say that forms or patterns is an empty metaphor because anything can be like anything else. In other words, if you take any 2 objects in the whole universe, you know, you can say they're similar in some ways and different in other ways. The theory of forms doesn't explain which similarities are important and which ones different. Which one, or, you know, which differences are important. Like, why we call that a tree and that a shrub? I mean, they're similar, but we're picking out particular differences that make that a tree and that a shrub. That's a monkey and that's a person. And we're saying which ones are relevant, which differences are relevant, and which similarities are important. Well, the theory of forms doesn't explain which, you know, what is relevant and what's important. And therefore it fails. Some forms are more general than others, and therefore they're both a copy and a pattern. Look, that means they're a form and not a form. Okay, so this is a kind of an easy one. So you're a human being, you're a mammal, and you're an animal. So if you're a human being, well, the more general term is mammal, so you're copying mammalness because it's more general, right? So you're a mammal. So the form would be mammal, and human being is the copy. That's the you know, that's what's copying the form mammal. But animal is more general than mammal. So mammal is copying from the form animal. So the form is animal and the copy is mammal, but mammal was supposed to be a form just a minute ago. How can it be both a form and not a form? I mean, how could it be both? That seems logically wrong, right? That has to be an error somehow. A fallacy, as we would say in logic. And finally, forms don't account for matter, material. And this time he is really talking, substance is kind of different, but here matter really means matter, like atoms. Like your matter. Like actually Aristotle subscribed to earth, water, air, and fire idea, but whatever things are made out of, your atoms, whatever, forms doesn't, the theory of forms doesn't account for that in any way. How could that be? So Aristotle was, yeah, he really railed against the theory of forms. I should note though that he didn't completely give up on the theory, on the idea of forms. What he actually believed were that substances, which are like you and me and just everyday objects, are made up of 2 things: matter, the material part, matter, and form. But the form is in the thing. So humanness is in me. It's not some abstract idea somewhere. The humanness is in me or you. And then you have your matter, like the cells of your body that make you up. That's what Aristotle's idea of the world was in terms of metaphysics. But he did not like Plato's more abstract version of forms at all. And levels some pretty serious criticisms, as you can see. All right. Well, thank you.